So I was working with a football team. It was actually the backroom staff team, so the physios, nutritionists, and the conditioning staff. And we were brainstorming and developing ideas for strategies that can help their performances. And so one of the problems that they were talking about is that they don't start particularly well, particularly when they go away. And we're talking about different warm-up regimes. We're talking about hormonal differences between home and away. And another factor was that they noticed that they lose goals at the end of the first half and at the end of the second half. So we're talking about sort of fitness strategies for that, but also fueling strategies. And we were getting right into the details, and they were all sort of arguing the toss about this and that and the other. We should be doing this. And I stepped back and sort of said to them, look, guys and girls, what is it that is a defining successful performance for you? And they paused for a moment, and you could sort of see a few of them making a few notes. And a couple of people suggested, well, successful performances is to be mid-table. Okay, mid-table sounds like a reasonable, sensible objective. That makes sense. But I said, well, but how are you going to achieve that? What's the way in which you're going to achieve mid-table performance? And then a very interesting thing happened, because everyone started to think inwardly about their bit. The bit that they were thinking about. So you had the conditioning staff talking about making sure that the players were fit. You had the physios talking about making sure that the manager had availability of those particular players, and the nutritionist was talking about making sure they had the right food and drinks available on the day. So they were all talking about their bit. And I said, what are the sort of objectives that sort of sit above all of you? And they started to think about the mid-table bit again. And I said, but how are you going to get there? What's the successful winning performance actually look like for you? And they really struggled to define what that would mean. And after a bit of prompting and discussion and nudging along, I asked them, how many points might you need? Okay, well, they all started to be clear about the number of points they might need to fit mid-table. They also then started to get clear about, well, how many goals might we need to score, and therefore how many goals would we need to stop conceding? Because, for example, goal difference really matters whether you're going to be mid-table or whether you're going to be in the relegation zone. Typically, you have a positive goal difference if you're in the top half of the table or not. And so I started to sort of boil this down to say, have you actually defined this before as to what the objective is, and therefore what you need to be working to and having sight of every day? I said, no, we haven't actually done that. And one of the girls actually chirped up and said, look, I think then what our objective is to be scoring more goals than we let in. And they all sort of looked around the room, and it was almost awkwardness about, that sounds too obvious. But it sounds so obvious, we've never actually stated it out loud. And once they got to that, I then was able to prompt them with some specific questions to start saying, and how do you go about determining that? If that's your successful performance, how do you start building that? How do you start aligning all of your work to accomplish that? And then now the physios have got a channel. I need to make sure that the managers have got availability of their best players in order for us to concede less and score more. Nutritionist has now got some direction around the fact that I need to make sure that the fueling strategy allows people not to concede early in the game and towards the end of the halves, and so allow them to fuel appropriately to those objectives. So now this is a critical step in when you're generating a performance method or a performance model. The previous video that we covered is about making sure you clear the decks a bit. You focus on and creating a list of things that you don't want to do. The second part, when you actually start generating the model, it starts with that winning performance. I would say that for a lot of teams, for operations, for businesses, that is probably going to give you the biggest return from just getting clarity of what our direction is. And so, for example, with this particular club, actually understanding our objective as a support team is to support the players and the coach to score more goals than they concede. That's our focus. That's our successful performance that we're aiming towards. And so therefore, this is what we've got to do today. For an 800-meter runner, for example, that could mean just simply defining, I'm a female 800-meter runner and I'm running 2 minutes 5 seconds at the moment, and my objective in 3 years' time is to run under 2 minutes. That's what a successful winning performance looks like, from which you can then build. And we'll do that in later videos about how you then start to develop the systematic deconstruction of performance. But you can apply this to any different aspect of the challenges that you're working through. We've applied this in educational settings about raising standards or raising the effectiveness of the learning methods that they're using. We've also applied this method into business. And a good example of that in a retail business, where actually there's so many different aspects that they could be considering, actually just understanding what is the clarity of successful performance for you. And they were able to distill that down to the basket that a buyer or customer puts onto the checkout. We want to increase the value and therefore the spend per basket for each person that goes into their shop. And then once you've got clarity of that statement of the winning performance, you can then start working backwards to think, well, what fulfills that? What allows that to happen? What are the things that we think and consider, but also maybe, when we'll cover this later, you could use some statistical methods about how you can actually hatch that plan. So number one principle, if you're thinking about trying to develop a performance method, a performance model, performance thinking in your organization or your operation, is to start with a statement of what success needs to look like. So as you do this, it's going to require some discussion, some honest, candid discussion in your group. It's going to require several iterations for you to do that. And the last thing I would say is be aware that it will feel obvious once it's there, because it offers you clarity. And if it's really clear, you'll probably go, yeah, that's blindingly obvious. And that's probably a signature feeling that you've actually got this right. In later videos, I'm going to cover how you can go about organizing your thoughts and the sorts of questions that you can ask to filter and to scrutinize as to what goes into your model. So if you're interested in that, then press subscribe and you'll be notified of any videos that are coming up. Thanks for watching.